Of course. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm Amber Weber with the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. I'm pleased to announce our first guest, Roy Pfaltzgraff with Pfaltzgraff Farms. He is actively engaged in the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union and has been an active participant as well on the Colorado Collaborative for Healthy Soils through the Producer Advisory Council. He's going to be giving testimony for the soil health bill. And we're just really thankful for his engagement and involvement. And I am pleased to introduce you to Roy.
Thank you, Amber. Let me get this shared. The joys of running multiple screens. Sometimes it doesn't do what you want it to do. So hopefully you guys can see that.
Looks good, Roy.
I'm Roy Pfaltzgraff. Pfaltzgraff Farms LLC is the entity that we farm under. We do direct sales under Plz Farms and brown bag birdseed. And when Max talked with me about speaking, he said, well, you can speak for 15 minutes. And I thought, well, I don't know if I can speak for 15 minutes. And those of you who know me will understand that statement. One of the things that we face in Colorado and, well, all the Western areas that are farmed, our farm was broke out of sod approximately 130 years ago. Tillage was obviously the standard. There was always fallow rotation because, you know, we don't get enough precipitation and the challenges of our climates. The pictures you see here are not our fields, thankfully. One of them is dust blowing, and if I remember correctly, that was in about December of this year, which means it's blown all winter long. And then on the right, you can see the layers of tillage that washed after a heavy rainstorm, and then you see how the water ran off. And that's one of the challenges that we really have to face in our climate. This last year, our fields ranged between 5 and 8 inches of precipitation during the growing season. And we saw a temperature range of 23 below to 105 above. And then of course we have wind. The one wind gust worth noting was in May at 84 miles an hour, and it came at about 1 in the morning. And it blew well over 70 miles an hour for about an hour and a half that night. So we faced that challenge. And where we started, when I came back to the farm for the second time in 2016, I compare where we are to where we were. In our weed control, before 1999, we were doing tillage. We went 100% no-till in 99. We went to chem fallow in 99, so we still had a fallow year in there. The difference now is we've gone to continuous cropping and working on getting that soil shading in using residue. For fertility, we started soil testing in 84, and we would always fertilize to whatever the industry said you need, 1 3/4 pounds of nitrogen for every bushel of wheat that you plan on producing. And where we are now is we are doing Haney testing, PLFA. We fertilize to activate the microbiology. We found that you need a little bit of nitrogen to get things started, but you don't need to fertilize to the levels as long as the Haney test shows that you have the ability to make up the nitrogen you need. We're using crop rotation to increase fertility. We are going to have 6 different edible beans this year that we're going to raise on 2,000 acres. And 2,000 acres is the size of the farm. I better define that better. But we're going to have edible beans. We raise buckwheat to increase phosphorus and manganese levels and all those things. Insect and disease control was always insecticides, fungicides. We're learning the relationships of plants. We are raising chickpeas intercropped with flax to help prevent ascochyta, which is a blight that once you get it, you cannot stop it. you can control it, but it's not, it cannot be eradicated. So you end up having to spray fungicides 4 to 5 times a season at least $20 an application. So significant cost savings by using the intercropping methods. And we're finding that sugar goes a long ways in helping things. This last year in our corn, we saw that there was starting to be some insect pressure. So I went out and sprayed it with a pound of sugar an acre. That increases the Brix level of the plant, which makes it unpalatable to the insects. And it also brings in a lot of your beneficial insects. We don't rule out chemistry as a final option in some of those things, but we try everything else before then. It used to be we raised 1 to 3 different crops a year, and in a 3-year rotation that always included fallow. Where we are now this year, the latest count is 17 crops. And we are using a rotation developed by Randy Anderson of the USDA. He has since retired, but he had found that if you rotate 2 crops that are seeded in warm soils and 2 crops that are seeded in cold soils, you have a significant reduction in weeds. So we've been doing this for about 4 years now. Most of our applications, we're using about half of the chemicals and half of the fertilizers that we used before we started this, and we're not seeing a significant loss in yield. Usually we can tie that more to moisture than we can to anything else. We always straight cut things before. Now we're doing everything we can to retain height and residue. We use a stripper header, and that's the picture on the lower right. A stripper header, it's that the fingered drum there will spin between 500 and 1,000 RPM, and it literally pulls the heads off of the wheat plants and leaves the rest of the stalk. We use it in proso. We've used it in chickpeas. Other edible beans are not a big fan of it because they're so fragile. And it gives us a lot of residue. And you can see in that top picture, that was drilling chickpeas 2 years ago. And that was wet soil. It was one of those things that I was worried about getting stuck, but with the seeding equipment that we have, it allowed us to float over it and retain residue. The top part of that picture is already drilled. So you can see how well the drill moves through that and retains that cover. And then we're starting to play around with some living mulch, and that moves into the living root. It used to be we'd have a crop 2 out of 3 years, and we'd increase organic matter 2 of those years and then lose at least half of it on the 3rd year because there was nothing growing. There was nothing feeding the soil. So now we are continuous cropping. They claim that you can't do that in arid areas. There's actually been research done by the University of Nebraska Extension Service at Grant that shows that at most you lose is 2 inches of moisture because the rest of it ends up in evaporation. We're seeing a lot of that with some of the different seeding methods we're using. And we're working on developing a perennial root. We're using Dutch white clover to, it pretty much hangs out underneath the canopy while the crop is growing, but after the crop is harvested, it opens it up to sunlight, which helps keep that root there, and it generally then blooms in September and October, a time when our bees don't have anything better to eat. So it helps out with that. Now, the challenges that we ran into doing this, the first one's information. There's nobody you can call and say, hey, I'm going to grow buckwheat. How do you raise it? Or flax or chickpeas, or we figured out sunflowers. We've been doing those for 45 years. We wanted to direct harvest millet, and we ended up having to develop something that works for us and is now being implemented by a lot of farmers across the High Plains area. There's no test plots. That's one of the issues that we run into with trying to get insurance is they want test plot data to show that that crop will grow in Colorado. And there isn't any. I mean, as far as I know, I'm the only producer of buckwheat in most of Northeast Colorado. There might be one or two other outliers out there, but there's not yield data to provide that for insurance. Finding seed, yesterday I was on the phone for 6 hours trying to track down seed. And it's really, I mean, everybody I talked to was in Washington State. And one of the things I've run into is I want to raise some of the heirloom grains. And there are people that have seed, but because I'm not organic, they don't want to sell seed to me. And it's challenging because they see what we're doing as a threat, because they know, you know, we have better yields usually than organic production. And so they're worried about losing market and losing the value in the market that they have there. Marketing these crops is a challenge initially. Everybody always claims there's no markets, there's no place to go with this stuff. And what we found is the more you look, the more you find. And I'm starting, you know, I start joking now that I go to the fridge to get a gallon of milk and I find another market behind it. We've started doing direct marketing. We have our own line of gluten-free mixes using millet flour. We sell our honey at farmers markets, doing a lot of different things that most farmers don't do, because we have a relationship with what we're raising beyond, you know, opening up a trap at the elevator and watching the grain run out of the truck. So we've learned how to do some cleaning. We've learned how to do some hauling briefly. That's pretty challenging. We do some milling. We have a number of different mills that we mill flour for different product lines and stuff. And that's the picture you see there. That's a 1969 Clipper seed cleaner. It works great. It's supposed to be mounted to the floor, so we put it on a trailer, and it's supposed to be 3-phase. We're single phase, so we had to put a phase converter, all kinds of fun stuff on that. And then we run into the challenge of traditions of lenders wanting you to do what always has been done, insurance companies wanting to see results of other people that are doing the same thing. And when you're the only one, you have a really hard time telling the insurance company they want the production of buckwheat, and that's the one we're currently fighting with. They want the production of buckwheat from all the producers that we know of in Northeast Colorado. And we tell them, you have all the production of buckwheat from all the producers in Northeast Colorado, because we're the only ones. But we're starting to see some really interesting things. The soil health is increasing significantly. It does a lot to help when it comes to dealing with drought. This last year, we actually had the second best sunflower crop in the history of the farm. We've been raising them for 45 years. The field had 8 inches of rain. We had average moisture we had 5 inches of moisture on buckwheat. We produced an average crop. We had 50 bushel drilled corn when the neighbors were happy to have 25 in their planted fields. We're seeing a lot of support from our banker and other, you know, support in the community, NRCS, the Soil Conservation District here has, you know, been good to at least have discussions with, and making a lot of acquaintances on Twitter. Twitter is a huge one for farmers. I don't know if people realize it, but there's ag Twitter. There's a lot of people that I discuss what we're doing with, and I've never met them, and some of them I don't even know where they live, but they are like-minded, and so you can have a discussion without them thinking you're completely crazy. We're seeing increased fertility. Like I said, our fertilization rates have dropped to less than half of what we used to do. Reduce weed pressure. We less than half of the herbicides, and we're expecting that to continue to drop. We're seeing a lot more demand for our products. The buckwheat we raise actually goes to a gluten-free malting company, and their largest customer told them the other day that next year they want 300,000 pounds for themselves. And that's more than the buckwheat that we raise in a year. So we're having to change some of our rotations and stuff to adapt to that. We're learning, new markets that are out there, the direct sales, other stuff. And we had buckwheat that went to Japan this last year for soba noodles. So a lot of opportunities are out there. And that's one reason why I work with some of these different organizations and get involved with some of these different things. Is markets is the most important thing to get developed, because if farmers can see increased profitability, they will move to new methods. We don't need government payments to do this stuff. We need to have the market pay for it and increase profitability. I'm not going to give exact numbers, but from where we were in 2016 to now, we have tripled our revenue and doubled our costs. So we're seeing, definite more profitability there. It's just a struggle when it doesn't rain sometimes. The pictures here, the top one is actually, you can actually see the growth on the roots, that little white spot there on some volunteer buckwheat in a field. And then we had mushrooms growing out in a field, and that field, if it's seen cattle, it's been a long time. They say you can, the only way you see mushrooms growing in a field is if there's livestock involved, and that's not true. But this tells us that the fungal health in the soil is really good, because that's the fruiting body. And so it's not going to flower unless it's getting what it needs. Where we're headed, we've built these new bins this last fall, winter. Haven't used them yet. Really looking forward to the opportunity to getting to use those. We're working on integrating some new seeding technology. We got a new air seeder cart that allows us to do variable rate and meter 4 different products at once. So looking at doing some different things with putting cover on top of hills where that usually don't grow crops very well, and some other things like that. Working on the direct sale thing. The big one that is we're pretty excited about is the perennial root with the clover. Dutch white clover will fix up to 100 pounds of nitrogen a year. It's a perennial that we've applied herbicides on it, and it knocks the leaves off of it, and it just keeps right on going. So really impressing with what we're seeing. And we're also finding that it gives some weed control that we didn't anticipate. And then the other thing is expanding the diversity of the microbiology. And we do that through diverse crops. We're looking at doing some compost teas and some things like that. And just trying to continue to add on to what we've been doing. So there's my contact information, our websites, what we do on social media. And that is a very recent photo of the farm that I took actually last week. And then you see our bee yard. It never moves, that's where it lives. We just make sure the crops around it will feed the bees. And then some of our products that we are selling and developing and working with. So that is my time, and I appreciate being able to share this with you.
Great, thank you, Roy. Are there any, we have time for a few questions. Are there any questions for Roy?
I see in the chat, I didn't say this. We are 10 miles south of Haxtun, Colorado, which is way up in the northeast corner. We're 30 miles from Nebraska both ways. So we see a lot of wind. Our average rainfall is supposed to be 14 to 16 inches to give you an idea of our climate. And we always joke that, yeah, we get 14 inches of rain, but I can remember the night that it came. So it usually is very extreme weather events. And that's one thing, our soil infiltration rates are amazing. You know, we got all of this last moisture as rain. We had 3 inches of rain. We don't have any puddles in our fields. Everything's soaking in, and that way we can take advantage of it later. There's a question there about the bank. We work with Points West Community Bank in Haxtun. We've been banking at the same bank for 40 some years. And the big thing is developing a relationship. It's not necessarily the bank itself, but it's the loan officer. And going in and sitting down with the loan officer and telling them when things are working and telling them when things aren't working. And having that clear communication. He's welcome to come out anytime. Usually when he comes out, he picks up a jar of honey. We're the only producer of buckwheat and honey in in Colorado that we've heard of. Of course, we're the only people that raise buckwheat in Colorado, so it kind of makes sense. But just that open communication with the banker is so important, because they challenged us at first, but we provided them all the contracts, and this is what things should, you know, sell for. This is what the yield should be. This is where the markets are. And after we provided that, they've become super supportive. They follow us on Twitter. The local bank president actually is trying to get his brother, Who Farms, to come down and see what we're doing, because he thinks his brother needs to be doing that. And so, you know, just always open about what's going on. The products that we sell, we have dry edible beans, honey, 3 different gluten-free millet mixes that don't taste like they're gluten-free. That's the most important part about that. We do wheat flour on occasion. We have soaps that have beeswax in from our hives. We do, sometimes we'll actually express oil from sunflowers and flax. So we, in the end, we have about 100 different products that we can sell. Right now we have, I think, about 20 some on our online store. So, do I see the problem of clover becoming a weed? Thankfully, Colorado is dry, and I really think that clover would be hard pressed. The big thing is to knock it back with herbicides at seeding, so that way the crop has time to come up. Once Dutch white clover is 45% shaded, it goes dormant. So it actually stops pulling moisture and just kind of hangs out there. So, yeah, and you know, Sarah, there, we do sell through Five Fridges Farm. That's a once a month farmer's market. We sell at All Seasons Farmers Market, which is in Wheat Ridge on 38th and Teller, I think. In addition to our online store, which we now have 2 delivery locations, one in Wheat Ridge and one in Boulder, that we do weekly delivery of eggs and mixes and whatever too. And when we have chickens for sale, they'd be available there. The problem is when we raise chickens, for meat, they don't stick around very long. They get, you know, snatched up pretty quick. So.
Hey Max, can I ask you a question to Roy?
Yes, sir.
And on with you. Roy, thank you for the presentation. This is second time I had the opportunity to listen to you. And this is great to see these things happening. And my question is there any neighbors around you trying to copy what you are doing, so that, you know, somebody is trying to take advantages of what you are doing, basically? Can you say that?
Well, when we started, we would see people wandering around in our fields but when we went to talk to them, they would run and get in their pickup and drive off before we could even go talk to them. Now they at least wait until we get there so we can talk with them about what we're doing.
That is an improvement, I guess.
Yes, it is an improvement. I was lucky enough to be chosen to be part of the Farms project, and Northeast Colorado has a lot of innovative farmers, and so there's people watching, and some of the producers in the Farms project, we're a long-term practitioner, but some of the new practitioners are starting to do some of these things. And one thing that I really push is markets. I'll share my markets with you all day long because I have a friend that works for Ardent Mills. Farmers always worry about, they're very protective of their market. And I have a friend that works for Ardent Mills, and he laughs about that. And he goes, the thing is farmers always fight over the same piece of the pie. What they don't realize is they live in the bakery. So it's up to the farmer to make that decision. People say that, big ag we're forced to do these things by these chemical companies. No, we do them because they're simple and they're easy. We work hard enough. We're not marketers. So we want to do what's easy. And that's why I'm always willing to share my markets is the more people that do it, yeah, it's going to, if everybody raised chickpeas at once, it would kill the market. But that's why we raise 17 different products. It's risk management. It helps us manage the weather. There's only 1 week out of the year that a hailstorm is going to affect all of our crops. Otherwise, they're harvested or they haven't even been planted yet. So there's a lot behind this, and farmers are starting to see what's going on and trying to understand and practice. The one thing that I really get frustrated by is people claim that you need to have special equipment to do what we're doing. We have a really cool drill. It's not required. You need a drill that can handle residue, a sprayer, and a combine, and you can do everything that we're doing. And so there is need for some capital in some cases. Usually the drill is the limiting part, but we just want people to see what's going on and welcome them. We do tours. We have people come from all over the place. Even in the middle of a pandemic, we had some people visiting and wandering through fields and looking what's going on because we know how to wear a mask. Luckily, I have my first round of vaccine. My parents are vaccinated, so we're getting ahead of that as well.
I appreciate it, Roy. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Roy. It really is an inspiration to see what's possible with your operation. I'm going to give Roy a round of applause. If you want to unmute yourself or put your applause or reaction in there, you certainly deserve it.